Can we
All right.
ignore?
So the overwhelming story is obviously the way COVID is affecting the MTA. The financial picture, as you will hear from our speaker today, Bob Foran, is absolutely the worst since the Great Depression, and worse than that even. There is a little bit of optimistic talk now of a House Senate joint meeting. And in that meeting, which is a reduced amount, it's not a 1.2 trillion, but it is 988 billion. I did read something about helping airlines and mass transit systems to the tune of 85 billion. If the MTA can get the 12 that they need, that would be amazing. And that would obviously go a long way towards resolving the current crisis, but nothing is a sure thing yet, for sure. What is on the table right now are layoffs of 9,400 workers if we don't get federal aid, 40% cuts in bus and subway, 50% cuts including possible total elimination of some weekend service and or lines on the commuter rails, a suspension of the all-important capital program, which is 51.5 billion or thereabouts, and which would go a long way towards making our system ready for the let's say for the next 10 years easily, with new signals, CBTC installation, accessible stations, new rolling stock, just a host of things, completion of some extensions, but all of that is on hold right now as we await, and you'll hear much more on the financial picture from Bob Foran. In all of this, the MTA has actually taken some steps to reduce the financial burden on themselves. They have lessened the reliance on outside consultants and are using in-house personnel, which people have been asking them to do for many years, which is a positive. They have reduced the use of overtime, but of course that means things will take longer and you're paying for it in another way with salaries. But they have reduced, they were criticized at the amount of overtime, and they have reduced it. And I'm sure we will hear more about this from Bob. All of us have been talking to our elected officials and other organizations and lobbying, not lobbying, but informing them about what we need, how quickly we need it, what it would mean to the region, what it would mean to the cost of doing business in New York, if anyone would still do it without a vibrant, active mass transit system. I have said over and over that if service cuts of this nature were to go through, it would be the end of New York life as we know it. People are expecting to go out of their home or office and get a train or bus within a very reasonable amount of time. But if you have to wait an hour or 50 minutes where you once waited 20 minutes or 15 minutes, it's a no-sell. People will find another way to go, which will then exacerbate the deficit and make things even worse. Employers won't want to be here if their employees can't get around easily. Real estate values will sink. We will be even more in the red, which means our tax base will shrink. The whole picture is frightening. New York is, of course, 10% of the gross domestic product of the entire nation. So I hope this is all not lost on Congress. The MTA has done a pretty decent job of informing many members of Congress about what this would mean for their states if the MTA cannot succeed and must do these kinds of service cuts. So this is what we're all waiting to see. In the face of all of this, of course, we are now in the every other year cycle of fare hikes and or adjustments and toll hikes. And the first public hearing was held on the 1st, December 1st. There was another one going on as we speak right now, which is why I am not attending it because of this meeting. I will attend the next 4 fare hearings so that I can hear what the public has to say. Interestingly,
Yeah,
the service cuts are not. What's that, Randy?
Me too.
Right. What exactly? What is interesting is that all of these are going on, yet the service cuts, which are very much on everyone's mind, are not the subject of these fare discussions, these fare option discussions that are going on. And as you probably saw from our proposed testimony, we are wondering how and why you're holding fare hearings now when we don't know what kind of service we're going to have. And isn't that the cart before the horse? How can you ask somebody to pay more for 40% less service, for instance? No retail establishment would ever do that. So it's sort of an odd juxtaposition. We don't know where our service is going, yet we're asking people to possibly pay more and maybe a lot more. So that is the topic of our testimony. We think these should not be taking place now until we learn what is the fate of our mass transit system. Lisa, did you want to say anything additional about that?
I think there were 90 speakers today. Jerry testified this morning. He was
great.
number 9. There were, I think, Jerry, did they say 90 speakers or something? Chris, I believe that you were on as well.
Yeah, I was on, and they finished around 11:40, but at least 12 did not show up, and that's also adding 2 elected officials.
Yeah. So they have this great eject button so that if you go over 2 minutes, you're out. It's the first time I've actually seen it, although they did let Udonis go over today, and they did let Udonis speak again today, which was surprising to me because they told us that if, that there are people who are speaking more than once at the end of the list, but I guess,
And the total length of today's hearing was how long?
It started at 10 o'clock and ended around 11:40.
So they're really not as long as they advertise them to be. Interesting.
But last night's one that started at 5:30 only lasts 25 minutes, and only 2 people spoke, and it was like a ghost town.
Last night.
There were no board members at that one. That was just a. Kate would like to say something.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Hi. So the hearing last night we're calling a satellite, and there's another one next week. This is like when we used to open up Stone Street so that folks could come in on their own time. So Lisa and Chris are exactly right. There were no board members present last night, but it will be packaged up for the board as we would have done with the walk-in testimony or the video testimony from Grand Central or Stone Street. And what we're advertising, what we're doing for those is we keep it open for 15 minutes after the last speaker. So yes, last night was extremely short. We did send reminders to all 7 registered speakers, but we are working hard to make sure folks can get their voice heard.
So there's technically a total of 6 of the virtual Zoom ones and 2 of the satellite ones, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Jerry,
and now you can do it from the comfort of your home rather than having to go to a place.
It takes half the fun of going to eat in a different zip code. Jerry, did you want to say something about today's?
No, not really. No, it's what was expected. It's exactly what was expected. They basically echoed what Andrew was saying. How can we have fare hikes when we don't know what the service cuts are going to be? It's kind of silly. So we're kind of just going through the motions.
Yep.
Andrew, you did get a shout out from Alan Van Capel, who did testify also.
From who? I'm sorry.
Alan Van Capel, Commissioner Capel.
Capelli.
Yes.
Oh, really? Alan Capelli.
Yes.
Yeah.
From Staten Island.
We
miss him.
Staten Island has been very, very well represented at everything so far. I may have misread everything about trying to eliminate the discount for the Verrazano, but there seems to be a lot of, there is definitely a lot of opposition to that. Sal Albanese was a guest speaker today too. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Commissioner Capelli, he was wonderful.
Miss
him.
He's still around.
Yeah.
He's on city planning now. Sharon has her hand raised.
So, and he's very active.
Great. He's a good man.
Yes.
Sharon.
Sharon.
The fares aren't really dependent on the service. I mean, the service is the service and the fare is the fare. If they cut the service, we aren't going to cut the fares. You and I emailed about this, Andrew. I don't really see the relation. It's just like stalling to say that we're waiting to know what the service is.
No, if I may, this is Trudy, the voice from above. I would suggest that everybody read from end to end the article that starts on the first page of the Times today. I think it's online also, but I don't think the full article. It's very long. It's like a full New York Times page, and beginning on the front page with a lot of paragraphs. But it really, and Sharon, this will explain to you because it is connected. And one of the things that we're going to be testifying, at least I and the testimony on behalf of the Transit Riders Council will be saying is that until we know, and I hope that Farran will talk about it today also, that until we know whether or not we're getting 12 billion or at least a good portion of it, as it says in the article, from Washington, we really don't know how much we will have and how much the fare raise will go up. That's number one. And number two is, Sharon, is that in terms of the riding public, when you tell them what you did publicly already, that you're going to be, that you may be cutting back, or there's a good chance you'll be cutting back on service unless you get money, and then you say, but the fare is going to go up also, people will start finding alternate means of getting from where they're getting, and then we'll have even less money. So that's the connection between the two. And Andrew, I don't.
Yes.
If
Thank you,
you want to talk some more about that, or at least if you do.
I would also, Sharon, in many previous fare hike hearings, which many of us attended in person, I always remember the wonderful holiday lights going to the Staten Island fare hearing. But in any event, what's different this year is the prospect of incredible service cuts. That has never been an option or talked about or even thought about in the fare hike hearings 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. And that's really flavoring this year. Do you lower fares, or do you do some highly inventive fares, which are on the table this time, particularly for commuter rail, to entice people back to the system? And will people want to come back if there's service cuts of 40 and 50%? So it's really interrelated this time. You'd be absolutely right if this was a different year, but this year I think really stands on its own, unfortunately.
But one of the things we say, is it worth paying 4% more for 40% less service?
Yeah, try that in a retail establishment and see how far you get. But of course, the MTA is not a retail
I can tell you, without going into detail, that there are, hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Judy.
Oh, okay. That there are discussions going on in Washington on various levels, and both legislative and executive, or executive to be, I don't know, whatever, how you want to say it, about this situation, so that it's been noted, and it's just a very, everybody says this is the new normal. Well, this is the new abnormal. It's really horrendous, and we don't want to drive people away. Well, read the article. I'm not going to go into it. I just suggest that everybody reads the full article in the Times.
It's on the front page.
It is.
It's on, but then it goes. That's just the beginning. It then is continued, and it's the full page of page A8. And you've got to read the whole article, especially various things that talk about the juxtaposition of the service cut with raising the fares.
And it's important for the commuter rail representatives to read that as well, because commuter rail is definitely mentioned and is definitely a part of this picture. One little bright spot in all of this doom and gloom is that some elements of the capital program have continued to move forward. The Long Island Railroad has done some important third track grade crossing eliminations. Those continue. School Street comes to mind. I'm sure Jerry will be speaking about that. Transit has repaired the Archer Avenue, replaced tracks on the Archer Avenue line, and CBTC installation continues on Queens Boulevard and is scheduled to begin on the 8th Avenue line. Some additional work on the Rutgers Tube is continuing. Metro North has replaced some bridges on its New Haven division in Westchester County. Randy might be giving you some other updates on his report. So also Transit has made some additional stations accessible. So there are some bright spots, and anyone who has ridden the system, as I have been doing fairly frequently recently, you've never seen the system cleaner. I'm really amazed. And yesterday on a 4 train going downtown from 86th and Lexington, I got on a train that was really crowded. So in some places, folks are returning to the system. As Trudy will tell you, that is also highlighted where and when those folks are entering the system. That's in the New York Times article as well. But there are some crowded trains again, and hopefully the ridership trend will continue.
Christopher has his hand raised as well, Andrew.
Oh, how come I don't see those? Aren't I a co-host of this thing?
No.
No.
I thought I was. I should see these raised hands. Oh, well.
Andrew, you left out one thing. The F line but on the Carver line is also being worked on. Is doing also the work too. Replacing
That's true.
The signals too.
Culver line work is continuing.
Just to chime in, you mentioned earlier about the public hearing on the Monday one. That one lasted longer than I think so far, because that one lasted in almost exactly 2 hours on the nose, from 5:30 to 7:30. But you did have.
But I believe, Chris, 360 minutes are allocated for each of these things, and they are not going anywhere near it.
Yeah. The only thing I will say is the seconds when they take away your microphone and your camera, which is okay. The only thing is when you're transferring them to the mic and camera, it's not a second. It does take at least 5 seconds to 10 seconds. It depends on that person's computer, because not everyone has an updated computer, or if they do, it resets the system again. It does take some time. So.
And they allow for that, yes?
They do, but sometimes. Yeah,
it's very strange.
Yeah, it's strange, but it's not like a second. It takes more than a second. I will say it takes like at least 5 to 10 seconds. It's
not a smooth transition. I've told Will that it's not smooth. Jerry, you had some issues with it this morning as well.
Yeah, I was listening to Jerry, and I was watching, and I seen the same thing, and I was like, I don't think it takes a second. That's got to be that's like the 24th century, but we're not up to that century yet.
Wow.
On that.
I still think they moved it along pretty good though.
I mean, all things considered, they're doing very well, considering that it's making do with something that nobody knew how to do last year.
Well, it was sort of nice not having to have to deal with it, and the reasons for having to deal with it now we could do without.
Yeah.
But yes, we have learned a lot since the beginning of this. Lisa, did you want to give any kind of report before we move to the chair reports?
Let's see, we met last, when did we meet last? In September, right? So since we have met last, Ellen departed. So now you have a staff of 3. And Gav has been interning with us, and we're delighted to have her. We have one other intern, Shaul Picker, who is, we're hoping may be able to come back. So if it takes us longer to respond, we appreciate your patience. If it takes us a little longer to get things out to you, we appreciate your patience. We will, in that vein, have some meeting dates for 2021 to you that will get out. We're just waiting for the executive committee to take a look at them. So we'll be getting those dates out to you. We're still awaiting the MTA board dates to make sure that there are no conflicts. And also, hopefully there will be MTA committee meetings again. I do anticipate that we will be Zooming at least through the next year. I would anticipate that the MTA meetings will be held in a Zoom capacity through the end of next year as well. At least I would anticipate that, but who knows? Maybe they'll find a way to inoculate us as they did in well, in some movies that some of us may have seen with drone
Yes.
drops, but perhaps not. Hopefully, for better or for worse, a majority through at least the third quarter of next year. So we continue. We do have the ability to go into the office at times. Today was potentially going to be one of those days that did not pan out. But you know, there is a great potential for things to get worse before they get better. So you know, just everybody be safe, wear your masks. There's another mask force coming up on December 10th. So I've signed up. I'm sure Christopher has signed up. Sheila, I believe, has signed up. Bradley I think has something else on Thursdays, so probably has not.
Oh, I might be able to do that one. Good.
Okay, well, there's all different times. Andy Pollock is very optimistic by saying by the end of the by September 2021 we should be back in 2 Broadway. Andy, I wouldn't count on that. I would say that some people would be in the office by September 2021. I wouldn't expect that they're going to be hosting massive gatherings of more than you know, some people, but not allowing public to come back into the office. You may be able to see your families again for Thanksgiving with less concern, but I'm not sure that I would anticipate that you're going to have 50, 100 people in an MTA board meeting again until there's a greater confidence in people's health and wellness at that by then.
That might
So-
depend on whether we get 40% service cuts. Otherwise, you might have thousands of people in there.
Right. We could start now.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that there's been a lot of concern expressed from a lot of folks. The advocacy calls that we continue to participate in are very focused on how we get the message across. You know, the message seems to be heard in Washington. We did have a meeting in the other day that was where Senator Gillibrand was the featured speaker at the town hall, and she gets it. There were a number of speakers, including from the Hospitality Alliance, from the Bus Drivers Union on Staten Island, from a number of other, you know, a number of other organizations that are very interested and tied in to the importance of transit. It happened to be at the exact same time that I was testifying, so I had one eye on each screen. So it's hard to, you know, be as detail oriented on that as I would like to be. But please know that we're continuing to talk to and educate elected officials, continuing to drive home the importance of not just the $12 billion, but Trudy's favorite topic, the congestion pricing. And Sheila and I had a very interesting conversation about gas tax with staff from the Assembly Ways and Means Committee. So that, and in combination with Bradley's work on climate and resiliency, we'll be working with other advocacy organizations and looking at gas tax to come up with proposals and work with elected officials on moving some of that forward as potential revenue raisers for next year.
I've heard some elected officials start talking about gas tax now.
Elected officials are talking about that. Bobby Carroll today was on talking about his non-essential delivery box tax, which is something that he's been pushing for quite some time, which I think we said could raise, what was it, $3 million. But you know what, every dollar you can shake out of the couch cushions right now is going to be helpful. And I think that, you know, it's another dollar that's less that could potentially be cut from whatever needs to be, what else needs to be cut. Yeah. And I see Randy has.
Did we ever get a follow-up with this Assemblywoman Pullen about, she seemed negative on that, claiming that she downplayed the whole thing.
Yep. So we spoke to her staff, and her staff, and that conversation was that based on the calculations that the Assembly Ways and Means staff had done, it didn't indicate that it was going to, that our analysis seemed to be greater than what their analysis was. And so when we met, when Sheila and I met with their staff, they explained to us what the disparity was. And there's a lot of intricacies with the petroleum business tax and the MTA, the 12 county MTA tax, and distribution of it. So we're going to, Sheila and I and Bradley are going to look at those numbers in addition to some of the climate and resiliency proposals to see what the appetite might be and to see what some of the actual dollars might be. We came out with some ideas for potential funding language that could conceivably come up with, just tripling the gas tax within the construct of what it is now could bring in $375 million, which is no near the $1 billion that we thought it would be. But changing some of the language could bring it substantially higher. So we want to
And
work
if you
with
put in
them.
language that for upstate, a portion can be used for roads and bridges where they don't have,
They already
know.
get that language is already in it.
great.
That's already part of the apportionment
You
of the
want to
gas.
sell it, that has to be in it.
It's already part of it. So
Great.
that's a component of the way it's already divided up. So there's other ways to maneuver within it. Around December 12th, we'll know whether or not New York State is going to sign on to TCI, which Bradley helped me out with the specifics here. Is the where'd Bradley go?
Oh, his internet went out, but he's trying to call in.
Oh, okay. But it's a transportation climate initiative, and that will be it's a multi-state compact that would bring in additional funding for it's a carbon-based taxation. So that would bring in additional funding based on carbon taxation. So we'll find out then, and that would have some kind of determination about whether or not there'll be additional funding that would come in, and whether or not gas tax would be something that would be palatable to some of the electeds. And finally, before I move on, before we go into the chairs, is we understand that there may be a legislative roundtable that looks at the MTA's budget and the MTA's finances, which would not necessarily include the MTA, but we're trying to find out what that means. But another panel of experts. So I don't know who the panel of experts would be. I don't know if that would be like us as experts, if it would be riders. We're waiting to find out more information, and as we do, we'll let you all know.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Lisa? Then let's move on to the chair's reports. Jerry, would you like to give the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council report?
Okay, since everybody got our October, November, and December reports emailed, I'm just going to hit the highlights. As Andrew mentioned earlier, some of the capital projects are continuing. Third track in particular is moving along quite well. The Elmont station is being built. In fact, I believe they put the platforms in just last week. But the biggie for us, other than obviously the MTA's financial situation, is that the Long Island Railroad is testing a new air filtration system on our trains that will be extremely beneficial in reducing the spread of germs, both COVID and flu. It's basically the equivalent of a MERV 16, which is a heavy-duty air filtration. We're still working on filling our council vacancies. Suffolk County sent up the names to Albany, so that's at the governor's appointment office right now. We're still chasing Nassau to get their candidates submitted. I'm kind of surprised that it's dragging as much since we do have former Long Island Railroad personnel working out of that office, but it is what it is. We are also following up with the Queens Borough president, but he's just new to the job, and I'm sure we're kind of low on his priority list.
He just got sworn in this week. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm sure he's got some bigger fish to fry before he gets down to our appointments, but it's on his radar. I mean, Lisa, you spoke to the gentleman, right?
I spoke to the gentleman. One of my former employers is one of his top 3 transition team members. So the full court press will continue apace.
Okay, and also the background check on our MTA board candidate has started, and hopefully that'll be completed by the time that the Senate reconvenes in January. Yesterday, I got to speak at the Vision Long Island panel, Keeping Transportation Alive. It's, I gave our opinions, our views, our concerns. I also gave the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council's position at the fare hikes at the MTA hearing earlier today. One item I did not have in the comments because I'm looking for some more backup on it is the flat fare. I'm sure Lisa will research that for us. I'm a little very concerned about the flat fare that they're talking about because the only way that works is if they take all the fares and they average them out. For someone like me living in Patchogue out on the island, it would be probably be beneficial. I might not even see a fare increase. I might even get a slight decrease. But for somebody that's in Mineola, Valley Stream, they could be getting socked with 10, 12% increase.
Yeah, I think Zone 4 gets sucked the biggest because it's right on the city line.
Right. So we don't want to see any of our commuters get socked, 10.
Can you imagine the same fare from Great Neck to Penn Station as it is from Montauk to Penn Station?
Well, I'll tell you, Jerry, if I can interrupt, at the Tuesday meeting, there wasn't any support for that.
Okay, well,
I mean, I could understand maybe shrinking the number of zones so that you don't get creamed if you're really far out. And there is already a cap on those increases for the highest zones in Metro North and Long Island Railroad.
Right, and I understand they were going to do the same thing to you, right, Randy, on Metro North?
Yes, they would be done in parallel if they were going to be done, but they were actually last night on the Connecticut thing, they also were opposed to it, the people who commented on it.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Hopefully it's a non-starter. Ridership on the Long Island Railroad is still only approximately 30% of our pre-pandemic levels. And one of the things I've been hearing, we have numerous complaints because of the ridership being so low. People being stuck with large amounts of money on their WageWorks accounts. This is something that we'd like to move forward with our elected officials to see what we could do to get these people this money. It would have been nice to get it in time for the holidays, but I think that ship has sailed. But if we can get something going for them, the big concern that we keep hearing back is, well, it's pre-tax money. Yeah, it's pre-tax money. It's no big deal. You send out like a 1099 form. When you send them the check, you say, all right. And then the commuter would be responsible to pay that tax when they file their income taxes in the spring. So hopefully we can get something done in that respect over the next couple of months, but that's about it.
Terrific. Thank you. Any questions for Jerry? And I can't see them, so Lisa, you'll have to.
Andrew, I'll make you the co-host.
That would be nice. Then I could see who's raising their hand. But speak up now if you have a question for Jerry while Lisa's doing that. Oh, now I'm a co-host, so I can see if you raise your hand. And there isn't anybody. Oh, Christopher, of course. Chris, go ahead.
No, one thing I do want to say is when Jerry spoke today, I have to say, Jerry, regarding with the Long Island Railroad also, and I have to say, you really did speak excellent on it. And actually, I did this as my clapping because that's easier to do. But also, Jerry, the one thing is in Nassau County, my fellow Long Island Disability Council over there is also opposed with this these fares because it is way too much. And I do not see them, looking at the accessibility parts in Long Island with them because they're very disturbed. And there were some advocates may not spoke yet, or they're putting in their testimony in, but they're also on the same side. They do not want to see the fare up. And second, they do not want to see the zones where they are going to be 2 zones in your Nassau County. Yes, you might have the nice bus there, but some people want the Long Island Railroad to get where they have to go. So there is a concern on the senior and disabled end, in the Nassau end. Just want to share that.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
And the Long Island Railroad is making stations accessible. They've put out press releases in the last month of what was it, Baldwin and another station that they worked on and made accessible. Jerry, you've gotten the releases, I'm sure. They've been working on a few stops. Lynbrook, maybe there was something.
They're doing what they can. Actually, they're trying to finish up the capital projects that they can with the money that they have.
Right.
But again, this is a concern because at those stations maybe that aren't accessible, that with the financial situation where it is, they're not going to be able to put that on their drawing boards. It's going to be, you have what you have.
Yeah, thank you. Randy, would you like to give the Metro North Commuter Council report?
Yes, I would. Okay, 1 second here. I'm trying to do several things at once. Give me 1 second here. All these emails. Here we go. Okay, so ridership is still down. Weekend ridership is better than weekday, but it's the same. It's the same for the Long Island Railroad and subways and buses and everything else. The one good thing for the MTA is that the bridges and tunnels. When I looked at it earlier, I think, yes, Sunday at 11:29. So it was a couple of days ago. Bridge and tunnel traffic compared to last year was down only 13.1%. So a lot of people are driving.
Indeed.
Indeed. Okay, so getting back to the chair, I was at a couple of press events, and anyway, the information is all. Nothing has changed. We're still running the same service we've been running since June or July. As I said, the report was included, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk about it.
Randy, do you know if the 15% service cuts on Metro North around the Westport area was correct?
There's nothing going to be talked about this month. Service cuts discussion is going to be in January if it happens.
Okay.
Any questions for Randy? Randy, I do notice that on a lot of the news reports, Metro North seems to have been, really badly hit this year by slip sliding and the leaves, the autumn leaf phenomenon, more than say the Long Island Railroad. Have you noticed that at all?
I get every morning 3 alerts from Hudson, Harlem, and New Haven. Could be 10 to 15 minute delays because of that. Yeah, it just happens to be a very treed area. I mean, they keep, as much as they cut, there's always more to be cut. And I read somewhere, I think it was in the Long Island Railroad, there was some complaint about them taking more trees than they really do, but I could be wrong.
Long Island Railroad has this new, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, has this new technology train that can detect problems on the tracks from leaves and such. I think Phil mentioned that at a meeting, maybe the last report the Long Island the president gave at the full board. Do you recall that?
Actually, they developed a new train. It's actually a laser.
A laser, yes.
It actually lasers the pectin off the tracks. It's cutting edge technology. I don't think anybody else in the country has this yet. I think we're leading the way on it. And hopefully maybe it's something that Metro North might want to look at. But the railroad's very happy with it, and it has cut down. Phil reported to us the other day that the amount of wheels that they have to retrue are down considerably since they've been using this new system.
I thought I heard that. That's very exciting.
And didn't he just say yesterday? I think he said they've got a second one. Did he say that on the panel?
Yeah, I thought he said they were working on a second one right now. Yeah.
Right. It was very cool.
No, Long Island should share that technology with Metro North, much as Metro North is sharing the special new air filtration policy with Long Island.
We've been joined by Bob Ferran, by the way.
Okay. That's wonderful. Any questions for Randy? Otherwise, we can introduce our speaker. Okay, so obviously the focus. Sorry, Randy?
Sharon is raising her hand.
Sharon is raised. Why am I not seeing that?
Because she's on probably another screen. Oh, she's physically raising her hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to thank Metro North for arranging with Laz Parking to accommodate permit holders on the Wassaic branch. to park at Southeast because that enables them to, at least on the weekends, ride the train to Southeast and then drive from there. And someone at Metro North made the effort to arrange that, and I'm really grateful. And I think a lot of permit holders will be. So thank you very much.
Did you
Thanks,
act,
Sharon.
did you get the emails? Because I don't get those emails for that specific subject. They said they were going to send emails out to people.
I didn't get one, but they may not have sent it to me because I'd been in touch with them directly. I don't know.
You
They
should
ought
be
to
on
let
a list
people
to get.
know.
You should be on a list to, if you sign up for emails, you should, and you're in that line, you should have got it.
From my dealings with that company, I would say that considerable oversight of their practices might be desirable, or that they're not the most efficient company I've dealt with in any way. I
But
mean,
Sharon,
one person tells you one
after
thing,
we
another
reported
person
your,
tells you, huh?
after we reported your issue with the lack of service to Wassaic on weekends and this parking issue, they moved pretty swiftly to institute the new policy. Have to give them
Well,
credit
that's
for that.
after I'd been on the phone with them for over an hour at various times and had been told one thing by one person, a contradictory thing by another person,
Yeah,
whatever.
but at least it's in place now, which is great.
Yes, thank heavens.
Having the service back would even be better, but
I also
we're
have a
hopeful.
lot of trouble with their website, the functioning of their website, but that's another matter.
You're not referring to the Train Time app, you're referring to the website.
The website where they say how you can park by number, or you can or you can't, or there are three different websites, or
Yeah.
Aaron,
Anyway.
that email I thought should have come from Metro North. Randy, was
What?
that?
Yes, it came from Mark Mannix, didn't it?
No,
Yeah.
the parking, the one on parking, the one that went to pass holders.
I didn't get it. Maybe other pass holders did.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, thank you for arranging it.
Thanks,
You're
Sharon.
welcome. So obviously, much of our discussion today has been about the dire financial condition the MTA finds itself in. There is no better person and no person who has the art of explaining every little piece of the puzzle and what is being done and what needs to be done to fix this terrible situation as the MTA's chief financial officer, Bob Ferran. So it is a pleasure to introduce Bob. And Bob, have you sent your presentation to Lisa, or are you going to do it from your screen?
And
Lisa
everybody please mute themselves.
Yes,
I've
mute
muted.
yourself, please.
I have the presentation. I'm ready to put
Oh,
it back.
terrific.
I'm ready to put it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. So this is the presentation that we made in November. It'll be updated for December when we put the proposed budget in place. The format of the presentation is very similar to prior presentations, but I'm going to provide more granularity this time as I want to kind of walk you through how we get to the bottom line of the November plan. Next slide.
Hold on. Sorry.
Okay. As always, we start with the prior plan. So the July plan assumed receipt in 2020 of $3.9 billion of HEROES Act funding. That is the House's bill proffered by Speaker Pelosi. And it included $3.9 billion again of HEROES Act funding, which is comparable to what we received in the CARES Act in the springtime. But it still projected cumulative deficits in 21 to 24 of over $12 billion. So next slide, please. So what has changed since the July plan? Well, again, you see the deficits across the top. We're projecting the July plan an operating balance of $702 million, but that rolled over, as we always do, into the next year to reduce the deficits. But again, projected deficits were still high. Well, the first thing that's changed is the HEROES Act funding of $3.9 billion we didn't receive. That was clear. Then we also had some re-estimates of some of our expenses, some of our revenues, and also some positive variances. Revenues, this reflects the actual revenues through August. This has non-labor expenses, We have savings in the first year, and then a combination of a number of things in each of the out years, which do decrease our savings. We have vacancies of $66 million. That's on top of about $137 million in vacancies that we reflected in the July plan. So our hiring freeze is working. We're hiring only those critical positions that have to be filled. Everything else we're trying to keep down. These small changes, the biggest change is in 2021. We assumed for 2020 that we would receive a reduction in aid to localities from the state. We only assumed it for this 2020. Now it looks like we should go ahead and assume that there would be a reduction in aid to localities for the state fiscal year ending March 2022. So we've reflected that here. We haven't received any official notice from the state, but given the state's situation, it does seem likely that aid to localities will be reduced. We have favorable variances on debt service. And so you can see now, preliminarily, we were projecting that the November financial plan would have almost a $2.5 billion deficit in 2020, $6 billion in 21, 3.6 in 22, almost 1.8 in 23, and almost 2 in 24, for a total projected deficit preliminarily of $16 billion. Next slide, please. And for those that prefer graphs, I've just laid out those projected deficits. Again, almost $16 billion were projected. Next slide, Lisa. Well, in August, we projected certain reduction actions that we could implement. And so we start again in the top line. Those are the deficits from the prior page. But we said there's certain things that we can do. We identified additional savings actions totaling $540 million in 2021 and almost $500 million going forward. Well, we've continued to look for savings actions, and since August, we've added more. So we're projecting $259 million of additional savings this year, reduced expenses, over $600 million in 21, and you can see 22, 23, 24, for almost $2.3 billion of additional savings actions. And that's in overtime, consulting contracts, and other than personal service, so non-labor. The legislation passed in the springtime allowed us to take the lockbox money. That's the internet sales tax, the mansion tax surcharge that were dedicated for capital, and said that we could use them for operating purposes for 2020 and 2021. And so that's reflected there, that we are going to switch those into operating. And that's part of the reason that we keep saying that the 20 to 24 capital program is on pause until we figure out the path forward, because we certainly need these dollars right now for the operating budget, and we can't afford to apply it to debt service for the capital program. We also have monies that were in the operating budget financial plan for, we call committed to capital. It's really pay-as-you-go capital, monies that we set aside to minimize the amount of debt we have to sell. Well, again, we're putting the capital program on pause until we see what happens. So we're just now taking that money, use it for budget relief, 187, 180, 120. So for a total of 600 million. We had monies set aside for other post-employment benefits. That's primarily retiree healthcare cost. That money was set aside to earn interest, but we could use it if need be for current retiree healthcare cost. And that's what we're doing. We liquidated those funds, and it provides about $337 million for the current year's retiree healthcare cost, which reduces our deficit. We are expecting to receive some FEMA reimbursement in 2021, about $220 million. And we're using the general reserve from this year, $170 million for deficit reduction. So in total, the actions that we identified and have already started implementing are giving you almost $1.4 billion of savings in 2020, almost 1.5 in 2021, 600, 580, 460, for a total of $4.5 billion that we've taken actions on to reduce those deficits. Now, you may have heard, we were directed at one of the board meetings to access the Federal Reserve's municipal liquidity facility for deficit financing. And we're in the process of going through that. We're working with the Federal Reserve, and we expect to close on that deal for $2.9 billion about December 17th. Now that's the full amount that we can borrow underneath that program. We've already borrowed $450 million. We can borrow another 2.9. It is deficit financing. It's a 3-year maturity, and we'll have to take it out with long-term bonds if other monies are not available in 2023. But the legislation that was passed in the springtime allowed us to sell up to $10 billion worth of deficit financing bonds and use the proceeds as revenues to offset our deficit. It's not something we want to do, but we have to do it this year to balance our budget. And our objective is to minimize the amount that we might have to use going forward. Why? Because one, it's a one shot. Two, it has an ongoing cost that will put pressure on our operating budget well into the future. Two, it reduces the amount of capital that we can invest in our infrastructure. And we, again, know we need to keep making those investments into our infrastructure. So we're really trying to minimize reliance upon this. But again, for this year, that's the plan we have. That together with the actions we've taken will give us an operating balance of almost $1.8 billion at the end of this year, which rolls over to offset the deficit in 2021 and reduces that deficit to about $2.9 billion. We continue to have almost a $3 billion deficit in 2022, 1.3 in 2023, and 1.6 in 2024. We are making progress, but things aren't standing still. Things are changing rapidly. And so in May, we asked McKinsey to go through and do an analysis of how the pandemic was affecting our finances and the revenue losses. And they said that basically between the loss on fares and tolls and dedicated taxes between 2020 and 2021, the midpoint of the estimated losses was almost $12 billion in just that short period. Well, we've again asked McKinsey to update their analysis, and preliminarily, we've seen some results. They're continuing to work on it, but they're providing us with two cases, a best case and a worst case. The best case scenario, the virus is contained through a combination of effective vaccine and resistance to the virus due to a previous exposure, eventually creating a new normal ridership level, which is estimated to be about 90% of the pre-pandemic ridership in 2024. The worst case scenario assumes a resurgence of the virus in New York City area, resulting in restrictions that are very similar to those that were implemented earlier this year. From that resurgence, recovery will be slower and it'll take longer before reaching the new normal. And that new normal ridership level is estimated to only reach 80% of the pre-pandemic level by 2024. Next slide, please, Lisa. So this shows what was estimated in May by McKinsey and what is the more recent estimates that we used in the November plan. And as they've updated them, the preliminary results were more pessimistic. Now, what this chart shows is ridership levels on the left from 0 to 100%, so pre-pandemic ridership levels. And this is across all operating agencies on average. And then it shows by quarter going forward what the ridership levels would be. And you can see in all cases, they're showing a recovery. It's just a question of how quickly the recovery occurs. So the green line there is what they estimated in May, and we included in the July plan. And as you can see, there is a recovery that takes place. And by the time you get to 2024, we were estimating that we'd be back at 100% of pre-pandemic. Well, again, as I said, the more recent estimates are much more pessimistic. So down on the middle of the page, you have right above the blue line, it says, okay, what is the difference between the July plan midpoint and the November plan midpoint? And you can see effectively the same in 2020, but 2021, it's $849 million worse, and it's same amount in 2022, $1.3 billion worse in 23, and $1 billion worse in 2024.
Bob, can I
Yes.
just ask you quickly, what month did McKinsey draw up these estimates?
The preliminary estimates that are reflected here were in early November. They're continuing to work on them because as we all read in the paper, first, the resurgence, it looks like it's even worse than what we thought. They're now talking about the surge on the resurgence, and we're told to be very prepared for what could happen in the next week or so following Thanksgiving. And then we're told that the holidays at the end of the year, they're expecting perhaps something again. So we do know that it could be worse than what we've seen.
But we're also hearing that 3 vaccines
Absolutely.
may be arriving sooner than we thought.
That's it exactly. So that's what we've asked them to continue to do their analysis, because we're trying to see some things that are positive and some things that potentially are negative. So we're trying to get the most current information we can.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as we looked at this, we said, look, we're not going to use the midpoint between these two like we did in July. We don't have the capacity to absorb, anything worse than the best case, and certainly not the mid case. Let's go ahead and prepare for what the worst might be, and hopefully we'll have, an upside surprise, because we can't really afford to handle a downside surprise. So we took the worst case from their analysis, and that's again the second line right above the blue line on the screen. So that says in 2021, it would be $1.6 billion worse than the July plan, or worse than what we had predicted, and almost 1.9 worse in 2022, $2 billion worse in 2023, and $1.5 billion worse in 2024. So if you adjust those preliminary November numbers, the deficits that we had on the prior slide, by these worst case adjustments, you can see, okay, we have still that 1.785 operating balance in 2020. And again, the operating balance is because we deficit borrowed $2.9 billion from the Federal Reserve, but it does roll over and it leaves us with a $4.5 billion, $4.5 billion deficit in 2021, a $4.9 billion deficit in 2022, 3.4 in 2023, and 3.1 in 2024. I should say what we did is we took the projected rates of recovery, that is from where we are in 2020, what is the expected ridership level in each year? And we did that by averaging McKinsey's projections by quarter of each year. And down at the bottom of the page, it's a footnote that's kind of hard to see, probably on your screen, but it reflects ridership recovery on average system-wide of 27% in 2021. 54% ridership recovery in 2022, 71% recovery in 2023, and 79% recovery in 2024. So the worst case, about 80% of the pre-pandemic level of ridership is projected in 2024. And you can see that on the lines at the top of the page. The dark red is the worst case. The lighter pink is McKinsey's preliminary best case. So what are our options? Next slide, please, Lisa. Well, preliminarily, we had the deficits from the prior page. If we receive no new federal aid, what can we do? Well, we talked about it in August. We could have service reductions. We could do wage freezes. We could have additional fare and toll increases above 4%. We could do deficit financing. We know that we're already pausing on the capital program, so that's in place right now. So we looked at service reductions, okay? And the service reductions that we looked at were the 40% reduction in subway and bus and a 50% reduction in commuter rails. And we annualized what we thought the savings would be. And the annualized savings you can see in 2022, it's about $1,274,000,000. We don't, if we were to do service reductions, okay, so if the board voted to do service reductions to address the deficit, the earliest we think it could happen would be sometime in May, because there's just a number of things that happen. So we put 2/3 of an annual savings in 2021. In 2022, we're still we're still below kind of the 50% reduction and 40% reduction, because again, we're expecting ridership of 54% of pre-pandemic levels. So we think that this level of reductions could still work, might be tight, might be crowded, but it could still work in that year. But then we reduced the savings from service reductions in each of the other years as we're projecting that ridership will recover, okay? So then the second thing that we have up there is a permanent wage freeze for both reps and non-reps through 2022. The current cycle that we're on with TWU Local 100, which is the only union that we have an agreement with, covered 19, 20, 21, and 22. That had a 2% increase in 19, a 2.25% increase in 2021, a 2.5% increase in 2020, in 2020, a 2.5% increase in 2021, and a 2.75% increase in 2022. Typically what we do is we assume that all of the other unions will settle eventually according to the pattern that we have with TWU. So our financial plan included the assumption that every other union would come to settlement with us and would have the same financial results. So we built that assumption into the model. However, we have not settled with any of the other unions. So basically, we're not obligated to make any of those payments. And this assumes that we would not make any adjustments to the current contract until the next cycle begins in 2022, mid-year. So those are savings that we can do. We're also assuming that we'll negotiate with TWU for to not have the next two adjustments. And again, we've heard the union's position on that, but everyone is going to have to contribute to this. And so that's the point that we're putting on the table as our position. Now, it also includes no increases for non-reps. We had 2% built in each year for non-represented workers, and we're assuming that that's a freeze as well. So even if we were to do these two things, you can see that we're still looking at a 2021 deficit, projected deficit of $3.2 billion. 3.3 in 22, 2.3 in 23, and almost 2.6 in 2024. We didn't put anything on here for additional fare and toll increases. Again, that is a possibility, but we all understand, what our customers are, how they're suffering. I do have to say though, that the financial plan does assume a 4% increase in 2021 on the fares and a 4% increase on tolls in 2021. We have the ability, should the board so choose, to go above 4% on the tolls. And again, I remind you that last time we did tolls at 6%, not having congestion pricing and seeing how, traffic is continuing, to clog our streets, it may be something that the board wants to consider to go above 4% on the tolls. But those are options that are out there.
Bob, since you raised the issue of congestion pricing, and since it's likely that the new administration will act on answering the environmental question that MTA has been waiting for, are those dollars, and I've seen various years of it becoming online, 2022, 2023, is that reflected in this budget anywhere?
It's reflected as being available for the capital program.
It is.
What
Okay.
it's for.
Right.
And if you recall, it was expected to generate $1 billion beginning in 2021.
Right.
We put it as coming in 2023 just to be,
safe,
cautious.
Yeah. But it may come in earlier. Yeah.
We hope it comes in as soon as possible, but it is still dedicated after 2021. All the lockbox monies go back to capital.
Right.
And between those two sources, that was to generate $25 billion a year, or excuse me, $25 billion in capital for the 20 to 24. And that was the key. That was going to be the front end of the funding for the 20 to 24 capital program. And I'll just digress a bit. The next piece of that coming in was supposed to be $3 billion from the state and $3 billion from the city to match. I don't know whether the state and the city will be in a position to fund those according to a timetable or accelerate those. But you can see why we're having to put the the 20 to 24 program on pause, because all the funding sources that we're going to pay for the front end of that are now definitely at risk. So we have federal funds, formula monies, a little more than $1 billion a year. We're dedicating that to, the capital program. We want to maintain that kind of essential state of good repair work that it's a bare minimum, mind you, but we do want to keep that funded.
Right.
Andrew, it's Trudy on the phone. Bob, it's Trudy Mason on the phone. Could we get back to congestion pricing for just 1 minute?
Sure.
Or should we wait until the end of your presentation? Whatever works better for you.
What I'm happy to answer or to give you my thoughts.
Okay. It's been my understanding, first of all, there is a very good chance that we will get congestion pricing as soon as the new administration comes in, or at least get them to sign off on the EAS or the EIS and what EPA has to sign off on, or do it as a executive order or something. But once we get it, can't the possibility of that, or knowing that we're going to get it, then be used as the basis for a bond issue?
We'd have to see the revenues coming in. That's the first key. Again, we know it's supposed to generate $1 billion a year, but I think the bond market's going to want to see how that revenue comes in. Now, the could immediately be used for pay-as-you-go capital, as it comes in. But I think the bond market is going to want to see how steady and reliable is that revenue stream. So, it may be a year before, we're able to fully bond up on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Lisa, if we could go to the next slide. So I just summarized here what the annual savings were projected to be by agency and the workforce impact. So again, the total was $1,274 billion. I should notice that it excludes MTA bus, the 190, because deficit is paid by the city. So any savings that we have would accrue to the city's benefit. Okay. But you can see 343 million on the subway with a workforce impact. We estimate almost 2,400. New York City bus division, $641 million. Workforce impact, almost 4,600. Long Island Railroad Metro North, $265 million of estimated savings and 933 workforce impact. MTA bus, 190, 1,300 workers. B&T, it's not so much really service, but it's reduced landscaping, reduced painting, reduced things that, indirectly can affect our customers, but those are just savings and a reduction in the workforce to contribute to the overall benefit. On the next few pages, let's go ahead and flip to the next page if we can, Lisa. We've just put out some general terms on what we are looking at. Now, again, there's some very specific options that each of the agencies has gone through, and they've gone through and vetted them. We're not saying that these are things that will be final recommendations to the board if this is what we have to do, but it's like their best guess on how to handle the situation if need be. So again, it's just potential and they're under consideration. We're continuing to vet these also with the Division of Budget in Albany, because We want them to concur. You can see again, the annual savings, workforce impact, what we considered, and kind of the overall effect that you would see. These are not anything where we're just doing straight 40% across the board. We're looking to see first, where is there an alternative? And if there's an alternative for our customers to use, then that would be something that we would consider. Then we'll look at ridership. Then we'll look at impact on neighborhoods. And then we'll look at all these things, that a number of factors that go in. But basically, nobody wants to do this. But if we have to, we want to put them in with the least pain possible, recognizing that it will be painful. So the next chart, Lisa. So this is just the same for MTA bus. You can see the overview of potential impacts down at the bottom. The next chart.
It's funny, Bob, that these slides say service reductions of 40% may result in reduced frequencies. How can it not?
Yeah. Yep. Well, again, it's a combination. It's going to be a number of things. It could be elimination of bus routes. It could be shorter hours. It could be greater headways. It could be longer. It could be longer distances between stops. So
oh God,
they're just trying to figure out what could be done to minimize the impact. And it's also time of day, maybe during certain peak periods that the frequency won't be as affected as much as at other times. The next slide, please, Lisa. The same thing for Long Island Rail and Metro North. Here, the target was a 50% reduction. And you can see at the bottom of the page, some of the potential impacts. So the next slide, please. So in summary, even with those two things, potential reductions in service, wage freezes, we still have the deficits going forward. Now, this is about $11.4 billion of deficits remaining even after these actions. The key is going to be, what do we do next year in the budget? And right now, I can't tell you exactly what will be presented at the budget in December. We're considering ways of presenting it. Do we want to present it assuming federal aid? Do we want to present it with potential service reductions as well? Do we want to present it with other options? Or do we want to present it as we did in November, which just said deficit reduction actions, other than the service reduction? There is a bit of a strategy here. We don't want it to look like to people in Washington who aren't sympathetic to us that, oh, we can just cut service completely, do deficit financing, and we've solved the problem. No, we believe that the federal government should be supporting the MTA, which supports the region, and the region supports the national economy. So it's just a bit of a strategy on what we'll actually present. And then we're going to see actions that are going to take place. Right now, we've got what they call the skinny bill that is being considered, the bipartisan bill that Pelosi now has put her support behind, which is a $908 million bill. It's skinny. Billion. Yeah. Thank you. Billion. And it to be a compromise, a bipartisan compromise between the $500 million that the Republicans in the Senate wanted, or the $2.2 trillion that Speaker Pelosi and House were proffering. It includes about $45 million for general transportation issuers, but that's airports, ports, mass transit. We're not sure if there's an allocation to mass transit in there, but it's something that action may be taken on before our board meeting. And if so, we're told that by some that this is almost a down payment for something that could be done afterwards. Well, then we don't know what's going to happen in the Georgia senatorial runoffs, because that can affect, as you all know, the balance of power in the Senate, which could have an implication for us to go forward. We will see the governor's executive budget in mid-January, and we'll see if there's anything in there that's helpful to us. We've got the February and March time to see what the state legislature might do. But if we were to do these service cuts, it will take time, as I said, to implement it. And we think the earliest that we could put it in place would be May. So there is time, if you will, to off ramp, or there's time to adjust the service to a different level, reductions. So there's a lot of things that are moving here, and we're going to try to be as flexible as we can, and we will adjust our budget as we go into the new year to reflect the new situation. However, what we need to focus on is this next slide. McKinsey, as I said earlier, is estimating, even in the best case, that beyond 2020, as we get into the mid-20s, so to 2024 to 2025 and beyond, that we are not going to return to the pre-pandemic level of ridership. They're estimating that we're going to be somewhere by 2024, 2025 of 80 to 92% of where we were in January and last year. And that's attributable to several things. The first adjustment is remote work. It's an increase in remote work. McKinsey went through and looked at various different employment sectors. So they didn't do just a broad brush. They went and looked at individual employment sectors to determine what they thought the impact of the pandemic would be. And obviously there's a number of people who probably aren't going to go back to working regularly in a downtown office. And then there's some that will come back. But they believe that right now, the average worker spends about a half day a week away from the office. Now that's your vacations, that's sick days, but that's also working away. They believe that that will then increase somewhere to 1 to 3 days a week, depending on the employment sector. And that they believe will have a significant impact on our ridership of 4% to 12%. The next area, they believe that there will be reduced non-work trips, a 10 to 20% reduction in retail trips as people continue to rely on e-commerce, a 20 to 30% reduction in leisure travel. A lot of that is international travel. And the combination of those two things will result in a 2 to 5% decline in ridership. Then there's the shift, where people are either going to rely more on their automobile or for bicycling and walking for shorter trips, shorter duration. And they think that will have a 2 to 3% impact. The employment, they don't think is really going to, affect it much at all. But the combination of those factors results in projections of 80 to 92% of pre-pandemic ridership, in 5 years. So to me, we've got to get out of this deficit we have next year. That's the first critical point. We've got to figure out what we can do in the years beyond. But the one challenge we really have is we got to figure out how to right size the MTA service for a future new normal. And again, that could be service structure, service levels, but we got to right size our organization and our delivery of service to meet the demands of our customers. And that's a challenge we're going to have to start facing almost right away as we consider immediate actions to address the deficit, because we can't afford to just wait until the last minute and then try to respond. So to me, this is the I wanted to end with, not the chart about the deficit, because I think this is really going to be a big challenge for us at the MTA in determining how we're going to meet our customers' needs.
Bob, isn't it also possible that people may not be traveling as much in the rush hour, but may be going more in a shoulder period?
Could be. We just don't know what the behavior is going to be. And so we'll have to keep monitoring it to go forward. And whatever it is, we're not going to get it right. It's going to have to be an evolving process.
Sure.
Because people will continue to evolve in how they commute and travel. So. So that concludes the presentation, and we have to answer.
That's great, Bob. I know we have some questions for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Edith has a question or two. Can you unmute Edith?
Edith, Edith, I'm asking you to unmute yourself.
I am unmuting myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One coming back to the capital plan.
Okay.
I assume things already in construction, planning, etc., will possibly be going forward. Is that a correct assumption? And will those items that were the response of legal settlements, one cases, settlements, etc., that have timelines, where do they stand? And my second question has to do with what we're hearing about reducing the number of workers on trains. At present, we have been educated to use the middle of the train before and behind the second worker. That's going to be a major problem for anyone who needs the awareness of the train operator to be sure they safely get on and off trains. Are we looking at an entire new education program that will move that emphasis to the front of the train where the other employee is?
Yeah, I can't respond. I don't know the facts on the second question, but we can follow up and have an answer for you, I suppose. On the first, we're continuing to fund to the full extent possible the 15 to 19 in prior capital program projects that we have. We're trying to fund it at least a minimum on some of the 20 to 24. We're trying to do the design on 2024 projects because we would like to be ready when funds are available. But again, we're very limited in the monies that we have. I know Jano Lieber and his team are looking at various levels of funding. Whether it's the 51.5 billion, whether it's X percent of that or a lower percent of that, they're looking at options and all of those. And within the options, they're prioritizing the projects because we do know that there are key projects that we do want to fund. We've made commitments, and so we'll try to do those. But right now, we can't say what the size of the program will be until we see the path forward. But I know that Jano, for whatever level of funding, and again, they've made some assumptions on levels of funding for planning purposes, they are prioritizing projects within those levels of funding. So that, and there'll be things that just have to, be put on hold, but that's the philosophy and that's the intent.
Thank you. Chris, you have a question?
Yes, I have one important question. First of all, Bob, I love your presentation on the capital, how you break it down. The one question that I know I mentioned is every time you come to the meeting. When you guys propose, all these funding or money percentage of this, are you also accounting about A, reduced fare, B, the Omni? Because so far, I have to say, the Omni levels I'm seeing, because as I do the mass force or do my regular business, I see a lot of people using it right now at stations on those, as well as the reduced fare. I know a lot of people who uses it. How is that going through?
Well, we're using the same projection methodology that we have been using. And so that does include that there will be more increasing Omni usage. And right now the Omni is not able to give you a discount or things like that, but there'll be adjustments made to it. But no, we're continuing to forecast, that the reduced fares there, that Omni will continue to increase in market share. So those things are being considered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Lisa, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. I apologize. I've lost my video somewhere in the middle of this. Thank you, Bob. That was great. I was able to follow along a little bit better than at the board meeting. I actually have two questions, 2.5 questions. When you say one of the things being looked at might be shorter hours, and I know that service cuts are not being discussed in detail now, could that include the permanent closure of overnight service, permanent loss of overnight service? I'll get them all out there. The other is when you think the next full bore McKinsey report might come out. And then the other is where the $12 billion through 2021 number comes from. That ask is.
Sure. The 2021 number of the 12 billion, it's kind of gotten a good bit confused. That was the revenue loss that we were expecting, over 20 to 21 because of the pandemic. And it also included the $1 billion of congestion pricing loss. So there's kind of two things that have kind of gone back and forth where you're seeing the deficits that we're projecting over a longer period of time. And then it's the revenue loss that we have. So the McKinsey report actually said between 20 and 21, the midpoint of that loss was at that time was 11.9. So those are kind of numbers that are very similar, but I think they're getting a bit conflated. But the $12 billion was the revenue loss that we estimated earlier in the year from the pandemic and also from the federal government's failure to tell us what to do on the environmental side. We lost the $1 billion of congestion pricing that we expected to get in 2021.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the first part about the overnight closures.
I'm not going to talk about, any specific details. Those will come out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that everything, Lisa?
That was, thank you.
All right, Matt. Got to unmute yourself.
Matt, you've got your hand raised. Oh. All right, well, Andy Pollock had his hand raised as well.
Yeah.
Lisa, can you take off the screen share now? Randy's asking so we can see folks.
Yes. Oh, you can move people, yes, but I can do that. Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Positive. Okay, this is going to be a positive for Bob. So, first of all, this is the first time we're one-on-one since February. Second, this is going to be a positive question. Let's say, and I'm glad you brought up the races in Georgia coming up next month. Let's say things go in a positive direction. All right. 2 of the races go to the Democrats in a positive sense. If we get the 12 billion that Pat Foy keeps talking about, he mentions this all the time in the board meetings. We get the funding from the Federal Heroes Act. Can these cuts be avoided before May? And I'm just going to give an assumption. Let's say the money comes by the end of the first quarter, second quarter of 2021. Is it possible the cuts could be avoided if the money comes in that time frame next year?
Well, that's what the chairman has said. And the only caveat I'd put on that is, again, remember that the 12 billion that comes in, it's effectively a one shot again. So how far will that 12 billion carry us through? And then it's that last chart, that the last slide that we looked at, that concerns me, and I think concerns all of us. At some point in time, we're going to have to adjust our service levels for the new normal. And when is the best time to start that process? That I don't know, and I'm not saying that it has to start, right away, but at some point, we do need to make sure that we're matching the service that we're delivering to the level that our customers need. And so that's the only point I would kind of make is at some point, if these projections are correct, at some point, we're going to have to reduce service levels in some manner to meet the new normal.
All right. So
yeah,
McKenzie
go ahead.
figured that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, go ahead. This is your last chance.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You're all muffled, Matt.
Yeah, I can't.
Hear me? I just wanted to ask Bob if the $265 billion with all the construction going on is realistic. Shouldn't that be higher than that?
I'm sorry, sir, Matt, I didn't quite get the question.
Did you think that the $265 billion of savings is realistic with all the construction going on? Shouldn't that be higher?
The 265 million,
Yes.
From construction, he's saying, shouldn't it be the savings from that?
I don't know the 265 from construction. That wasn't in the presentation.
Yeah, I'm not following that either, actually. Bob has to leave very shortly. Are there any other questions?
I just
Stuart.
want to thank Bob for his presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, we all want to thank. Stuart, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Okay. And our protocol is that board members are recognized before guests.
Yeah, I didn't see your hand at all.
I raised it and sent you a chat. But that aside, Bob, the momentum may be lost because I wanted to ask the question earlier. And I put it in the chat to alert as well as check off the hand. When you were going through the assumptions of revenue generation with employees returning to work, did the team look at the return of tourism? Because I'm sure independent of the MTA, there are many sectors trying to increase that as things return to normal and normalize. I don't know what that represents in terms of revenue in the big picture. It may be peanuts, but is that something they looked at?
Yeah, it's that second little sliver that was up there, the one that was 2% to 5% reduction. McKinsey said a 20 to 30% reduction in leisure travel is what they assumed, and primarily international would be key. So,
okay, but if it will increase revenue, have we looked at how maybe advancing the rollout of Omni or having attractive tariffs or fares for tourists like we did years ago with different types of passes? That might be something to attract ridership.
Yes.
I don't want you to answer. I'm just throwing that out. The last question, because of the time element, is, are there plans to, in the budget, not on the revenue side, but on the expense side, are there plans in the budget to continue the cleaning effort across all of the agencies? And how are we at the same levels or at different levels to assure safety of the riding public? And how are we funding that?
Yeah, right now we do have continuation of the cleaning for safety purposes, the additional cleaning, and it is in our budget. So it's part of our budget deficit, if you will.
It's factored into the out years?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We have it continuing through 2024, the final year of this financial plan.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bob, so much for another brilliant presentation.
Bob.
Randy and I will see you at the December meeting, as will anyone else who's watching. Have a safe holiday period.
Okay. Thank you so
Bob,
much.
I'm
Thank
looking
you so
forward to
much.
seeing you in the finance committee in the future.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much,
Bob.
Bob.
Let's go to old business. Does anyone have any items of old business they would like to bring up? Hearing nothing. Andrew Kurzweil, is that you?
Andrew, I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure, Stuart.
Yeah. We talked about, but not in a while, the East Side Access Project. Has there been any new information on the timetable and travel assumptions?
I'm still hearing 2023 for the start of service. They still need to work with Amtrak on the Harold interlocking area and do some work there. But that's like, I'm still hearing 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Ask Jerry. Jerry, have you heard anything else?
Jerry had to leave the meeting, but that's what we've been hearing in our meetings, right? Larry, please correct me if I'm wrong. Or Marilyn, that's what we've heard in our meetings as well. And as far as service assumptions, I think that they haven't gotten there yet.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
And I was back and forth between meetings. Did he talk at all about fare evasion And
did not.
because we really, something has to be done about this.
It's massive. Yes,
It's just multiple. Is there
it
anything
is.
we
It's
can
all
do
walks
to
of life. It's
all,
you know. Go ahead, Randy.
it's all of us who ride the subway. The few times I've ridden it, I've seen it every station I've been at.
It's 7 or 8 people, and
Exactly.
and it's
It
just
is. And the original assumption of 300 million a year, even the IG said was woefully short on the reality. It's probably closer to 500 million a year. And this is it's like, it's really terrible. And we need to get a handle on it. And we're going to follow up with the new police, the new NYPD transit chief, Kathleen O'Reilly. We're going to follow up with her. And I'm still anxious to do a project on this topic because I think it would be illustrative. It's terrible. I was on the phone with former Chief Della Torre, and 7 people went through the slam gate right while I was talking to him.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, go
Randy?
ahead.
yeah. In today's press clips, which you should have all gotten, there was a story about trains out in Queens that got tagged over the weekend by.
I saw.
What the heck? Don't we have people who ride through there and see these kind of? Don't we have police who are supposed to patrol and ride around?
Yeah, these trains were on layup tracks. They weren't in a yard. I'm shocked. Shocked.
I am too.
And do you have Edith,
Edith,
Christopher,
please.
Andrew Kurzweil, and then Andy Pollack?
All right.
Okay, Edith.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to raise the issue of fare evasion on the absolute lack of any action from drivers. Number one, the new white line is routinely ignored. Number two, you have people walking in, front and back doors, no payment. It's gotten to the point where I'm not using buses because I feel they're totally unsafe. I have 5 or 6 people clustered over me, and they're all breathing on me, for God's sake. The other day, I went through 125th Street. I had to wait. Now, there were 3 cops standing there. I had to wait while 17 people walked into the gate while I was trying to go out.
Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous. 17.
Yep.
Yeah, I see
hear
7
you.
or 8.
Standing there.
I
And they
used to
stand
see
and
the
wait
Eagle
for someone
team
to open it.
periodically. Don't see them anymore.
I mean, these guys were just standing there drinking their water and talking about what they were looking on their cell phones.
Yep. Edith, if you
Did
can.
you get their numbers and report them?
No,
Yes, that would.
yeah,
that would be good.
That would be very nice. If I could try to get in front of each one of them and take their pictures. Yeah, I was trying to get
If you just take the vehicle number, we can do the rest.
No. This was in the subway.
You have
in
to
the
get their
subway,
badge
yes.
number.
Take the badge number. Yep.
They
gotta
don't
get a
like
picture.
giving it to you.
Not and much less and the agents in the booth are totally worthless still.
Yeah, I watched one. I watched
yeah.
watched people go through the slam gate and watch them do nothing, and I shook my head at them. But I should have reported the booth number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to get in and out is really getting very, very.
And I'm going to report it in the future.
If there's no usage, there's a hell of a lot of bicycles and baby carriages.
Andrew, we can have an offline meeting with the new police chief and explain all the concerns that the PCAC.
I'm working on that, Randy.
Yes, and the board members, because it's really aggravating hearing how Edith.
It's demoralizing to people that want to do the right thing, and they say, "What am I, an idiot?" Yeah, and that's not the word I would use, but I'm using it because this is recorded.
Should we make it a rule that you have to shut the gate behind you? Of course, then you'll get beaten up.
No, that's not the issue. I can't shut the gate behind me when I push the button. I dip my card and they're all standing there out there waiting.
Exactly. They wait.
Actually, they do shut, but sometimes they don't lock. And I've reported gates that don't lock. I test them all now when I see them. I reported one and it has been repaired, which is great. But sometimes the catch, and by the way, one of the police officers in the subway told me, yes, they lock, but anybody with enough force can pull it open.
Right. But I don't have enough force to push it open.
Right. Andy Byford, when he was here and I had this discussion, and we both agreed it's a new fare entry system that New York needs. This one is a sieve.
It's
And
useful.
I don't see how in Omni it's going to be any better.
No.
The one difference with Omni, and I was talking to some revenue and operations people yesterday because of the desire to remove the weekly and monthly time-based passes, and because of fraud. And I understand that some people are buying multiple cards and selling swipes. I was told that on the current MetroCard system, yes, they can isolate what cards are being used repeatedly in a one fare control area, but they don't learn that until 3 days after the offense. With Omni, they will learn it immediately. They will immediately be able to shut out a card or an Omni account. However, right now, they're not shutting anyone out, and it takes 3 days to find out who was doing it. So there's hope for a little better under Omni, but it's not going to remove the problem. I think we need a new fare control entry system.
Andrew, you've got
But
Christopher
that's
Greif.
expensive.
You've got Christopher Greif, then Andrew Kurzweil, and then Andy Pollack.
All right.
Yeah, Andrew, I actually agree with everyone because in my end, I mentioned this last time at the TRC meeting. In Brooklyn on the Coney Island Avenue bus, we have passengers almost ready to abuse the drivers on the B68. And this is ridiculous. But at the same time, too, it's not right because the driver, I agree with Edith saying, it's a two-way street, but the driver is by himself. And we don't know if that camera on the bus is working half the times. It's a concern because of a customer who's paying their fare, and I'm going to say the ones who do pay, they need to sit. And, I sent you a picture as well as Lisa, I sent you a picture. I see them doing a new testing something. Now they're putting an X in front of where the driver is, which I actually say is common sense because where the new white line is, and then you finally put an X on it, it's telling you you're not supposed to be in front of the driver. Move back because a wheelchair can come through, a walker can come through.
Is that everybody? Is that every bus or is that just one? I haven't seen that.
The only bus I've seen that was Jackie Gleason's. I only see it on the 68. I've not seen it on any other bus.
But did you see it on one bus or did you see it on multiple buses?
Multiple buses out of Jackie Gleason.
All right,
I have seen it on the 68, the B4, the 37, the 35, and the 8. And those are all Jackie Gleason's.
Thank you.
And Andrew, to adding also one thing, we also got to remind the officers too that passengers, including must wear face masks. I have not seen them doing that. And then you know what? When it comes the day we do the mask force that day, I don't see them telling them you can't go in the system without wearing a mask.
They don't want to get punched out. I know. I've mentioned it as well. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be going after these officers. But here's the thing: people gotta wear the mask. Period.
Absolutely. Andrew Kurzweil.
Yeah, I have a slightly thing, and what you will call it, the incident that happened. I shouldn't say incident. It was the weather conditions Monday, where it caused the closure of the Verrazano Bridge.
Yes, it was quite a day.
Yeah. My question is, could this maybe for once and for all kill the talk of the quote unquote people wanting to put a bike path or something on the bridge, because it's just not feasible. It is not safe. And this is just insanity of trying to put some type of bike lane on that bridge. It is just not
I
Because
wouldn't,
all they're gonna do
Andrew,
is
I would
fly
not
off.
expect one or 2 or 10 days of bad weather to stop the push for a bicycle path on the Verrazano Bridge. I just think those folks are very organized and loud, and they have political support. But yes, on Monday, it would have been very dangerous. If it was dangerous for a car or a truck, can you imagine for a bike?
Well, there was apparently a whole bunch of construction debris that flew off all over the place. I was looking at
That's
some of
not
the
good either.
videos.
No, but we'll keep you posted on that. And I think,
You had Andy Pollock and
Yes.
then Matt Shotkin
I
again.
don't see Pollock's thing raised, but okay.
His hand, his actual hand.
I
Oh, his
actually-
actual hand, okay.
Okay, this is about Omni. Everybody, it's the holiday season. I'm trying to keep positive, of course. So, this is about Omni. We have finally made to the end of the fourth quarter, and I remember, Al Poultry had mentioned that this was supposed to be the month that the readers were going to get installed on the buses in Queens and Brooklyn. I am personally expecting an expectation of the Omni readers to be installed sometime later this month, and I do expect to hear from Al hopefully by the end of the year regarding that.
Yes, I have had a long talk with Al the other day, and Brooklyn and Queens should get all of their buses omnified during the month of December.
Excellent. So hopefully there'll be something on MTA's YouTube channel about that, and hopefully I'll comment later this month at the NYCT meeting.
Great. And Matt Shotkin.
Or perhaps, there he comes. We see his hand.
Matt, you on? There you are.
Whether the escalators in Grand Central Station.
Matt, you're muffled.
That's what I can do, Andrew.
You're muffled still.
I know that. That's what I can do on my phone. Everyone, my question.
I can't understand you, Matt.
Okay, I will do it.
Can you move the phone somewhere so the mouthpiece is not muffled?
How's that?
A little better.
Do you know why the escalators in Grand Central Station have not been fixed yet? I mean, I go
know
the
that
other
they're
way
working on it.
Go to.
When I was there, they were working the other day. Depends, I guess
Yeah.
it depends on the day.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
working
Yes.
fine.
Andrew, thank you.
Oh, God, I thought they went out again. Oh. Okay.
We have,
Any other old before we move to new business?
We did new business.
We actually didn't. Chris, you have an item of new business?
No, I was just trying to get, because I know there's something on the agenda. You have something with new business.
We do?
It's on the agenda.
so we
Let
had
me
an
look.
item on the agenda for joint testimony.
Okay, let's do it now.
And actually, we testified on Tuesday. With testimony, with essentially what Andrew said at the beginning of the meeting, which was, how do you expect us to be able to testify when we don't even know what the service cuts are going to be like? So how can we testify? Is it worth it to pay 4% more for 40% less service, or 50%?
What's the alternative?
The alternative is to know what the service, the alternative is to wait until the spring.
Yeah.
And yes,
to
that'll
know
increase
what
the
is going to
deficit.
happen with the funding, and look at the totality of the situation before making a decision.
Till we know
To-
about the government, the feds.
To know about what the funding situation is going to be, to know what the proposed cuts might be. But right now it's piecemeal. and to see what's going to come down.
That has been the gist of our testimony, correct?
Correct.
And will be for the next meetings. Do we have volunteers? I know Trudy is going to speak at one. Do we have any other?
Trudy will speak on Monday, has volunteered to speak on Monday. Jerry spoke today. And we have had, we will, either Francina or Francis will speak for Metro North.
Great.
I spoke on Monday.
And
Yes.
Christopher spoke on Monday as well. And Christopher got quoted in, where were you quoted, Christopher?
News 11.
There you go.
All right. Excellent.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's time to
Any
eat lunch.
objections?
No.
Very
Thanks-
happy holidays
thanks,
to everybody.
Have a great
Holidays.
holiday.
Happy holidays.
Have good.
See you soon.
Everybody else will see you on
Thank
the
you.
14th.
Bye.
Bye.